we missing one?
We got one more.
Okay, yeah.
ELRT, most important one.
All right, folks. How's it going? Name's Ben Rodriguez, Senior Protocol Specialist here at Coinbase. Today we're going to be talking about restaking. So I want to set the tone a little bit for this panel. The thing is, right, I think one of my colleagues and friends, Aaron, yesterday had a keynote that said, when does staking make sense, right? I believe whatever the title is for that, right? So, it's everything that we're here right now, we understand this space. A lot of us are crypto natives, right? So then, staking is still kind of hard for, the quote-unquote normie, right? Now, all of a sudden, we have this new primitive, or relatively new. It's been, growing in popularity, right? And it just continues to grow in popularity, called restaking, right? So I want us to, think about that, that framework of, staking is still hard for, the normal person, and in the context of, now restaking. So I want to, before we get into the panel, I want to do some introductions first. Let's start with you, Freddie.
Thanks, Ben. Freddie Allen, Head of Business Development at Eigenlabs. We'll come back around and define what Eigenlabs and Eigenlayer is. Have been here for 5 months at Eigenlabs, came in through the acquisition of Rio. Rio was a pre-product launch LRT. And then I was 3 years at Coinbase with you, staking specialist on institutional sales team. Before that, I was leading business development at Bison Trails. Bison Trails was a market-leading validator operator. And then before that at Republic Crypto. So been in crypto for a while and been specializing in staking for a while.
Sweet.
Cool. Yeah, I'm Curtis Spencer, one of the co-founders of Electric Capital. We're a VC in the space. I'd say we're part VC, part research firm. We have a pretty large software development team. We do a bunch of on-chain analysis, run a few websites like Developer Report, NFT Pulse, CodeSlaw as well. I've known Freddie for quite a while, early customer of Bison Trails, so it's good to be on the journey with you all these years.
Thanks. So, hi, everybody. My name is Albin. I'm with Bitgo. Maybe a short one on Bitgo first. Bitgo is a security-first wallet infrastructure provider. We provide custody service to institutional investors, a couple of clients over here on the panel as well. As for myself, I've been with Bitgo for about 8 months. I oversee the sales for Singapore and Australia. Prior to that, I actually spent 3 years at Copper, which is another custodian. So my life has always been in the custody space. And prior to that, I was in TradFi with Goldman Sachs for about 8 years. Yep.
Hi, everyone. Amir from Puffer Labs. We work on development of Puffer protocol. So far, we're focusing on verticalizing infrastructure, and permissionlessness is our main target. Thank you.
Sweet, awesome. So let's start with what I talked about in the beginning of the intro, right? So people barely understand staking in general, right? So how do we get to a point where not only do they understand staking, but we're going to get into restaking? So why don't we each take a shot here and describe restaking as if, we're a bunch of normies in here. Anyone can start.
Kick it off?
Yeah, go for it.
So restaking is, a good way to think about it is reuse. So staking, you have a token, you point it or you stake it to a validator operator, and that validator operator secures the underlying network. For restaking says, hey, you've got a token and you're staking it. You can restake it. So you can not only secure one underlying protocol, like Ethereum, you can also secure a number of other protocols. So restaking, reuse.
So I want to hit back a little bit on that, right? I hear reuse, and we get Amir's is probably already we hear reuse, and suddenly we might be afraid in TradFi, maybe rehypothecation or something like that, right? Now, so Freddie's no, right? But that's the thing, right? When people hear that, they might be afraid of something like that, right? So how do you hit back on that, Amir? You think you might have something there?
I'll start from dictionary, Google stake, right? Having a stake in something means you can lose something. Let's start from there. There's something that can be lost. When we say proof of stake, meaning you prove to someone that you have something that you can lose. In context of Ethereum validators, you stake 32 ETH. You can lose it if you're dishonest. That's staking. Now, we created a bunch of things on top of that. Created liquid staking. The concept was if you didn't want to put down 32 ETH, you weren't professional enough to run one of these validators, you didn't have time to upkeep these validators, you went to liquid staking. You got a liquid receipt for your position in staking. It can be very small amount. It can be, I don't know, 0.01 ETH instead of 32 ETH. That's liquid staking. Now, an evolution to restaking, like we often skip one step between staking and restaking, which is just programmable slashing. I know it's more fancy and complex, but instead of just being slashed for being Ethereum validator, imagine you can be slashed for any commitment or promise that you made. I put 10 Doge on the table here that I will stick through this panel till the end of it, right? Slash me if I didn't. That's programmable slashing. The idea of restaking is essentially sharing security. That ETH, well, it might scare people off, but sorry, it is what it is. That ETH that is protecting, for example, Ethereum validators, it's going to then be shared to protect other things, right? It can be slashed. That's restaking. So now, back from the start, staking, liquid staking, programmable slashing, and restaking. And now we have liquid restaking. For those who are not proficient enough, who can have enough ETH or can do the restaking operations themselves, instead of me putting these 10 Doge on here to stick in the panel because I'm professional, I collect the Doges from you guys in the audience. You give me one each, and I'll give you a receipt. Then I become the operator of these restaking operations. So is programmable slashing operations. Restaking is different. So to me, that's like probably the overall definition, starting from staking to restaking.
All right, I guess panel's done now. Anybody here want to contribute to that or anything like that?
I mean, I think there's other ways to look at it too. Like, I think there's two main audiences for just the staking complex in general. There's like the capital markets audience, and then there's also like the compute and technical audience. And the capital markets audience, I think, actually really likes restaking because it's like there's layers to the game, right? Like if you're like a TradFi firm, you look at the ETFs. That's like baby's first crypto, right? You get to start there. And then you're like, oh, well, now I can buy spot ETH and custody it. Like now I'm a qualified custodian. Then they're like, whoa, well, actually I can get 3% yield on it. Okay, let's turn on staking. And then they're like, well, let's go out the risk curve. We can turn on restaking, earn even more yield. So I think you get that capital markets audience. That's like how they look at this stuff. And then the technical audience, I think is more interesting, right? Because what we have is this like beautiful security layer for financial transactions. But now we can like secure anything to Amir's point. And that's like where, you look at something like AWS. There's like no security there beyond like Amazon's reputation. Like if there's downtime, they take some egg on the face, they apologize, but they don't really have like any like true programmable stake there. And so imagine if you're GitHub, you can say, hey, I'm going to take some like ETH security and say we're not going to go down. Or you're like Anthropic or OpenAI. You can now like put real stake behind your system. And I think you'll end up having like much higher quality operators that keep the site up. So that like I think restaking is like this core base layer that lets us have like an always-on internet.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting.
Awesome, that was great. So I want to go deeper into that, and specifically I want to talk to you, Albin, about Bitgo as a custodian, right? And so the thing is with restaking, right, the idea is that you're going to be able to extend the use of your staked Ethereum, right, to be able to protect potentially other networks, right? And these other networks may have their own tokens, right? And you might be getting rewards by like opting into protecting that specific AVS or actively validated service, that protocol. You're going to get rewards in like many different tokens. So for example, like at Coinbase, we run an operator and we have like 5 AVSs, right? We might have 5 different tokens. The thing is, from a custodian perspective, that kind of sounds like a nightmare, right? So how does like Bitgo think about like restaking in that context?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think there's a huge fragmentation, but at the same time, it's the same case, right? It's the same case with POS as well. I think it started way back when staking came out for ETH, and from a custody point of view, we had to then think, oh, okay, there's like a bunch of validators out there, and this bunch of clients is working with this bunch of validators, this bunch of clients is working with another bunch of validators. How do we address that problem? So we've taken on a very agnostic approach as much as possible. I mean, to say, we'll take feedback from our clients, we'll survey our clients as to which are the validators that they work with. We then try to integrate as many validators as possible. So I think from Bitgo's lens, taking into context of restaking, it wouldn't deviate too much from this approach in the sense that we would look at what our clients are asking for. And I think in more practical terms, we have also recently integrated with the likes of Eigen and others as well. But I think it's a moving puzzle for us because things change so quickly, right? It could be a narrative on day one and then day two is something else. Or it could be another thing that just generating you. So at the end of the day, we would look at our client demand, what they're asking for, and sort of react accordingly to that. Yeah.
It's very interesting because so from Coinbase, we have Coinbase custody, right? And one of the biggest problems is being regulated by NYDFS. My colleague and friend Lewis talked about that yesterday, right? Is that there's going to be certain tokens that whatever we opt into in AVS, and we just cannot accept that on platform because it hasn't been run through the process of NYDFS. So it's a problem that we're trying to actively solve in general, and there's a lot of potential opportunity for that specific issue. So, Freddie, I want to go to you, right? Because you specifically would have to be able to kind of sell this idea to potential institutions and all that fun stuff, right? How would you present this to especially bigger institutions that are much more conservative, for example, staked ETFs, right? They're probably not going to go for something like restaking maybe in the beginning, but how do you try to explain that value prop to bigger institutions as time goes on?
We should pass this to Curtis, but
take it.
in the context of going back to the evolution of staking, I remember back in 2019, 2020, you start on an education cycle, and there's crypto native funds, there's crypto native institutions, and it just works its way through to more traditional asset managers and institutions. And the same thing will happen with restaking. You start on an education cycle, you inform them, you work with them, it gets tested, it gets battle tested, it becomes Lindy, and then it just works its way through the entire risk spectrum. So for restaking, it's a natural evolution of staking. We've started the education cycle with traditional asset managers and institutions, and it's performing more work, it's additional yield, but for funds, they're also taking a venture bet by restaking on the AVSs that they're securing. So it comes with natural evolution, and you're taking another venture bet on another protocol, another project.
I want to hear a little bit more from you, Curtis, on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think TradFi is going to be very excited about this because if you have 20 ETFs, they're all going to be able to stake. But now you get differentiation. If say you can say, hey, my ETF is the most degen one. We're gonna restake to all the new operators, get all these new tokens, and you can get this full risk spectrum. And TradFi loves to be able to sell more products, right? And a single ETF, you don't get that much differentiation.
Fair. I want to come back to you on specifically around AVSs, right? They're separate protocols, right? Mm-hmm. And we've seen going through the funding of alt L1s and all that fun stuff, multiple billions of dollars of valuation and stuff like that, right? How does Electric Capital think in terms of AVSs and maybe your possible investment into AVSs?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, we see a lot of AVS teams. I think what we look for is what really benefits from being an AVS, and what's a product that DeFi protocols in particular can benefit from. Examples would be a liquidating protocol, something that can make sure liquidators are always running. That's something that we see in market today. So there's the really crypto native lens, and then there's things oh, can you have a decentralized AI that's always running, which is a little more future looking, and we try to just take the pitches from people trying different things. But I think a lot of our thesis is try to find the things that have product market fit today, which we think DeFi is a big beneficiary there.
Yeah. Are we going to see multiple billions of dollars of valuation on AVSs?
Definitely.
Definitely?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. No, that's
Where
interesting.
things are going.
I think we already do, don't we?
Yeah.
Is there? Okay. Well,
I think
let's
so,
talk.
yeah.
I would like to, if you're that AVS, I'd like to talk to you.
No.
Yeah, can I just add something? it's categorizing the AVSs, right?
Yeah.
The AVS term was picked poorly, in my opinion.
Okay.
Just dApps. These are dApps. They have SLAs that can be slashed. And we are all in Web 2 familiar with SLAs, service level agreements. AWS goes out for you, you can go sue them, give you money for the amount of the things that you lost because they promised you that they run at certain speed. So like categorizing AVSs as their like tiny like applications on the side, I think was like sort of like a poor selection of words maybe. But they're just dApps that actually have active accountable SLAs. They mess up, they will lose money. Either the money will go to the user or they just lose money. And I feel like I would much prefer like categorizing them that. When we say AVS, we're gonna just limit them to the little small corner of subcategory of Eigenlayer, Symbiotic, Carrick. But they're really like, they're dApps, they need slashing. The slashing and that SLA was provided to them by an architecture called Eigenlayer. So I would much prefer that if we just go back and say dApps.
I like where your head's at. I think the dApp ship has sailed though, and maybe there's something else like
Yeah, we can
decentralized services.
definitely
Yeah,
pick
yeah,
it like
yeah.
word because I feel like we really limited these applications to just one corner by saying you're just an AVS.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I think that, let's change that. Let's call them dApps now. I'm making an executive decision. Now, so Amir, back to you actually, because you are creating Puffer, right? You're the LRT, right? So the thing is, and every LRT will have maybe a different strategy, so to speak, of being able to, on their like set of operators, to be able to run specific set of AVSs, right? Or dApps, right? How does Puffer think about that specifically?
So as sort of an abstraction layer, this protocol, this community-led protocol, should decide where the user's security should be distributed. That's on the LRT side. We should have sort of like transparent committees, transparent DAOs to say, these are the active risks of these so-called AVSs, and these are what we are opting into. And on the strategy side, of course, like we would like to, at least for the general Puff ETH, which is our underlying LRT asset, take the most conservative path. This might be boring. This might come out as sort of a boring strategy, not with sort of like DGen, YOLO, like opting in. But I think there are future solutions where you can have different tastes of LRT for your protocol. It's part of the different vault. You can have a YOLO vault versus a very conservative vault, where it has like less risk. That's on the LRT side. We are deploying our own AVS and our own rollup stack as well, which is served by that AVS. And right now we're going through a lot of actually like transparently defining the risks of that AVS and defining it for our own LRT. So really we're going through the whole like end-to-end process of like coming up with the risk. But yeah, that's how we are like measuring risk. We are partnering with research facilities, firms like Netherminds or like essentially gauntlets, like to actually find out what are the actual risks. And they would provide recommendations to our community and they will make their educated guess based on that.
Isn't there an incentive, so this for everybody in the panel here, isn't there incentive to be able to, like, if you want to maximize yield, right, the more AVSs that you will run, right? If, for example, like everything is just kind of like YOLO and all that fun stuff, like you'll just have like some operators running 100 AVSs or something like that. But then like someone that's more conservative may only be able to like run maybe 3 or 4 AVSs or something like that, right? Doesn't that like is a mismatch of incentives on like any side, specifically like operators and maybe custodians and stuff like that?
Yeah, maybe I'll take that one. I would say, yeah, today there's no slashing. So opt into all of it, basically, go all in. But once slashing comes alive, it's just risk. You're just compounding your risk. And one of these days, one of these like things might break. And also like, we don't want to like dive into the complexity of slashing. There's different types of slashing. There's shared security slashing. There's attributable slashing, where you have your own amount of like slashable asset not shared with another AVS. Those are all of the things that can compound and cannot compound. But I would say overall, yeah, you don't opt into all of it. You might be a more conservative like APR. You opt into all of it. Just wait for the day that everything collapses.
What about you? How do you guys think about it as a validator operator? All the AVS is coming through.
We're Coinbase. We don't want to fuck around and find out. That's why we we do have an internal, so we do have an internal due diligence process, right? Like a memo process to be able to assess specific AVSs, what their actual value is. And this is actually a question for all of y'all after this. Specifically trying to figure out what the value might look like and if they're actually like something real, right? But in the end, we're not going to be someone that like is going to just ape into everything. We're just not going to YOLO that. Even if there's multiple strategies or anything like that, we're not going to go for the YOLO strategy. So then that goes into what I was saying about like, actually, I want to move to something else because like, I just see the time. Multi-asset restaking, right? Multi-asset restaking. Like now we've just enabled, so we had like, ETH restaking, great. We have Eigen now, or the token, right? And I think it only supports EigenDA for now, but other AVSs can probably accept that. But now we have multiple ERC20s that can be part of like that, right? Like so, I think maybe my question here is, how do we think about multi-asset restaking, the risks around it, and the value behind multi-asset restaking?
Yeah, I mean, I can take one aspect of it. Like, I think I skew kind of anti too many tokens, and I actually like the simplicity of ETH and then potentially a stablecoin, because you're adding like more points of failure, especially if you take on a new asset, like you might require an oracle. There's just like a lot of additional complexity. And I think ETH, like when I think about the audiences, there's folks that want to take risks on AVSs for yield, and they don't want to take any volatility risk with Ethereum, and a stablecoin style product could work pretty well. And then I think there's people that want to be long ETH, and I think having ETH as this like money asset for the restaking world, it's just good for like the ETH asset class, right? So I'm probably anti going too deep down the like multi-asset route.
Yeah,
I'm sure other people take the other side.
Yeah, maybe slightly on the other side. I think we're quite excited about these kind of financialization stuffs. More so because I think there's an interesting way for counterparties to also isolate some of the risk, right? So maybe an example would be, at least from a custody point of view, we actually arrange quite a lot of tri-party arrangements where a counterparty can actually engage a derivative structurer, and then they can post a collateral at a custodian. And then nowadays we're hearing interest from clients that they want to post more exotic collateral, right? Could be a yield-bearing collateral, could be a RRT nowadays. And then now it seems like there's multi-assets type of RRTs available already in the future. So I think this kind of increases the type of products that could be rolled out more in a more creative sense, right? I think, but of course it brings back a lot of memories back in like whether it's MBS, CDOs,
That's fair, yeah.
2008. But again, I think if there's ways that you can isolate some of the risks, and if the counterparty is okay to take on the risk reward and the specifics behind the financialization of it, then I think all is fair in the game.
Yeah, and I think it's a timing thing too, right? Because you take like DeFi, like 2 years ago, people were like going into like 100% APY like farms, but now people like see that and they're a little more suspect. There's like ways to like assess the risk, and I think with AVSs and multi-asset restaking, we're still like really early there. Like I think we need to go through like one cycle of it to like understand like where the risks actually are. Much like we have like really good audits now, formal verification on DeFi.
Yeah. I have a lot of other questions, but we only got a couple minutes left. So I do want to get into what I talked about earlier, where there's like the popularity of restaking, many different protocols across different ecosystems, right? We have like, and I know Clay might be in here for Babylon and stuff like that, and for Bitcoin, right? We have Symbiotic, Karak, whatever. There's and Jito and Solana, Solayer, right? So I want to talk to, and I want to hear a conversation between all of us about this, about kind of like, it feels like we just got like this into restaking, and now we have almost like restaking fragmentation, right? So I want to hear multiple perspectives from like, obviously from the custodian side, right, and some of the investor side, right, on how we think about like, for a customer, for example, being able to like wrestle with that many options, right? Or even just, for example, a custodian being able to wrestle like, oh, do we add support for Symbiotic? Do we add support for this, right? So I want to hear kind of your thoughts around like kind of this like seemingly restaking fragmentation.
Can
Please,
I
Amir.
just address their concerns already? So I would say like they should look at this landscape as more of a which AVS am I dealing with? I don't see a fragmentation. Let's say I'm just gonna give a Web 2 example. You have PayPal, it needs economic security. Why? Because if they don't, for example, withhold like moving your $10 to your friend, you have to punish them and like slash them for some amount of money. But they're also quite lucrative and they've been honest. They can give you a lot of fees. You're gonna put money behind securing PayPal. It doesn't matter if PayPal uses the slashing architecture of Symbiotic or Eigenlayer or Karak or anybody else. You just go deploy to whichever location, whichever AVS that you're protecting. If there is a valuable AVS anywhere, I would say the mental model should be to go secure that AVS, regardless of it's an Eigenlayer, Symbiotic, Karak, or other things. That's in the eyes of an institution. In the eyes of an LRT, almost quite the same. If we do see that there is an opportunity on an AVS that is revenue generating that we would like to deploy our users' funds for sort of like security of that asset and it's going to have good returns for the users, we will go and pick that regardless of the underlying architecture. I think there is no fragmentation in my eyes because it's just an implementation difference. Symbiotic might do slashing differently than Eigenlayer does. It's not that you're bound to that protocol. It's just a smart contract that does their SLA upkeeping differently.
How do you think about that like today versus in the limit? Because in the limit, I agree with you. Like after all of these protocols are like fully
So
baked.
right now, it's just a farming craze.
Yeah.
They have tokens. Just
Yep.
I want more of these free tokens. That's it, right? Because like the staking yield is so poor. It's what, like 2.9% right now. Everybody is after these airdrops. Today, people are just going to get that airdrop or whatever compound yield the native yield token of those protocols provide. But in a long term, when I'm talking like 5 years, like all these protocols, like it's like comparing like, it's again, I keep saying this in every panel, like we shouldn't be selling the underlying infrastructure. Sure, sell it for the free token airdrops, but don't sell it in the long term. No software developer sells AWS or GCP. It's just there. It's an architecture. The software is running on it. Why do we care, right? And that's the philosophy that we should go in the long term. But today, I would say it's just fueled by farming.
Pushing back a little bit on that, right? So coming from maybe an implementer's perspective, right? Yes, the architecture is a choice that we have to like dedicate resources to, right? Like, AWS versus GCP. Like if we're running on AWS and we're like, oh, we can't, like we have to implement GCP, that's an implementation thing that we need to like dedicate resources to, which is why I framed it as like potential fragmentation, because like something that might necessarily be done for Eigenlayer be a little bit different than Jito on Solana, for example.
Yeah, well, I would encourage you as service provider to the funds to integrate everything, because like basically you're the infra side. When you're sitting on the infra side, integrate everything. Your request might comes in that your customers, like liquid funds, they don't know where Jito is, for example. They're like, oh, Jito is generating good money. I want money out of Jito. Coinbase, do Jito me, Jito for me, right? So you guys, as infrastructure side, are like encouraged to do AWS, GCP, like everything. So when a fund comes to you, you're like, I'm ready. Let's go.
Cool. Anybody else have any thoughts on? So then last thing, with the 40 seconds that we have, is restaking the evolution of staking in the sense that everybody's going to be restaking in the future?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitable.
It's inevitable?
Yeah, if yield's there, people will go after it. Not everyone will, but that's like by design.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. The risk.
Yet to be determined.
Yet to be determined.
Risk adjusted.
Risk adjusted. Yeah. All right. Everyone, thank you so much for joining this panel and being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.